What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and Doctor Strange's What If episode number 4, I'm pretty sure just gave us the major or a major plot point for Spider-Man No Way Home. And here's how. So what happens over the course of this episode? Okay, the gist of this What If episode is that instead of Stephen Strange breaking his hands in a car wreck, what if his girlfriend Christine dies? This leads to him being guilt-ridden and ultimately trying to find a way to bring Christine back. He comes across the Ancient One trains him to become the Sorcerer Supreme, and a lot of the stuff pretty much transpires the way that you think it would. He ends up fighting Dormammu, he defeats Dormammu, so on and so forth. The big difference here and where everything shifts is that because of the fact that the death of Christine still weighs on his mind, he ultimately ends up using the Eye of Agamotto, which as we know houses the Time Stone, to go back in time and find a way to save the life of Christine. The problem is, everything he does fails. No matter the circumstance, she always ends up dying. Sometimes she gets shot, sometimes the building catches on fire and blows up. Regardless of the situation, Christine will always die. The Ancient One reappears and then tells Stephen Strange her death is an absolute point in the timeline. Now that harkens back to the events of Loki, when Owen Wilson's character told Loki that there are fixed points in the universe, things that cannot be changed. They have to happen. A really good example of this is when the Judge told Loki that the Avengers going back in time during the events of Avengers Endgame had to happen, right? Because Thanos blinked out half the life in the universe. They couldn't go back and stop Thanos from performing the snap because the very fact that they had to go back in time to stop Thanos indicates the snap had to happen. Otherwise, you would create a paradox. So to avoid that, they went back in time, grabbed the Infinity Stones, brought them to the modern day, and then undid the snap that way. Now the question is, why was Christine's death an absolute point in the timeline? Because the death of Christine is what led to Stephen Strange becoming the Sorcerer Supreme in the first place and gaining the ability to go back in time and stop her death. It's what you call a grandfather paradox, right? If you gain the ability to time travel, you went into the past and you killed your grandfather, then how could you exist? To go back into the past and kill your grandfather. You create a paradox. Now in Marvel Comics, they answer that and they solve that by just creating a branch universe. And that's kind of what happened here, that when Stephen Strange indicated to the Ancient One that he didn't care about any effects it would have on the timeline, and that his only real concern was amassing enough power to save Christine's life, the Ancient One split the timeline. And so what you got was timeline A.1 and timeline A.2. And in A.1, Stephen Strange never went back in time to save the life of Christine, right? In that moment, when he was talking to Wong and he was obsessed with the idea of saving her life, he put down the Eye of Agamotto and said, no, we don't need to worry about that. Timeline 8.2 is the timeline we've been talking about, where he did go back into the past and all that kind of stuff. So you can call 8.2 Doctor Strange like sad Strange, right? You can call him Sad Strange. And then 8.1, you can call him Happy Strange. And we'll just use those two names for the rest of this video. Now, over the course of this whole thing, Sad Strange ends up basically just kind of bringing forward all these demonic entities and then absorbing their power, right? In order to make himself stronger. And Happy Strange is just kind of continuing on in his role as a Sorcerer Supreme. But neither one is aware that the other exists, right? They don't even know there's like a separate timeline within the same universe. They don't know that. That's not supposed to happen, right? Universes are supposed to have a singular timeline, and that's it, right? Just from the past to the present, done, right? Just one whole timeline. Like what basically happened here was the Ancient One like taking a road that was designed for one vehicle and then splitting that road in half and creating 2 lanes of traffic, right? That dog don't bark. It just don't work. It's not supposed to happen that way. And so because Stephen Strange, sad Stephen Strange, kept doing all this stuff, he was basically destabilizing the universe at the same time. Ultimately, of course, he ends up basically saving Christine's life after absorbing Happy Stephen Strange and then basically dooms all of reality in the first place, right? So quite literally, what Sad Strange had done was knocked out the wrong Jenga piece at the wrong time and the whole universe came crashing down. That's basically what took place. In reality, he seems to have been the only survivor of that universe, which has happened multiple times in Marvel Comics. Hyperion, Kevin Brashear, the son of Blue Marvel, the Fury, like Galactus when he fought the Watcher at the end of time. That kind of thing has happened multiple times, right? Being the last survivors of a universe. In fact, we know that when Franklin Richards, the son of Reed Richards, when the universe ends, he'll actually merge with Galactus and then be reborn as an even more powerful being in whatever universe comes next. So it's not uncommon to see that kind of thing take place. Now, here's how I think the events of the What If episode tie into Spider-Man No Way Home. I think what's gonna happen in No Way Home is exactly what happened here. That basically the timeline's gonna be split, where the Ancient One is the one who split the timeline to basically create a chance whereby Sad Strange could be defeated by Happy Strange, which we know didn't work, that it's gonna happen accidentally in the events of No Way Home. That for whatever reason, probably due to the fact that Peter Parker wouldn't shut the hell up, Doctor Strange's spell went awry. And when it did, it split the timeline by accident. That's what he's referring to when he's saying that Peter is living two separate lives. And the longer he does that, the more it deteriorates the timeline and the universe. How those timelines take place, we're not fully aware. We could say that in one of these timelines, no one knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and the other one, everybody knows, and that things just kind of pop off from there. We don't really know how somebody like Dr. Octopus appears in this, or how Electro, or any of those other characters, presumably the Lizard from all the little clips and things that we've seen. We don't know exactly how all that's going to unfold. We can largely assume they've been there the entire time, truth to tell, because Mysterio had been there the whole time. We just didn't know until Far From Home that he was a guy who actually worked for Tony Stark, and it just kind of been dicked over constantly. So it wasn't until they were kind of like, yeah, he was always there, that it turned out he was always there, right? So it's very easy to do with somebody like Dr. Octopus or the Lizard or something like that. And the reason why is because, in all honesty, it's kind of ridiculous for us to believe that we're aware, or Spider-Man is aware, of every single villain that exists in New York. That doesn't really seem to be the case. Now again, how all that ties in together, I'm not entirely sure, which is why I'm not saying that Doctor Strange, the What If episode, gives us the entire plot for Spider-Man No Way Home, but I think it gives us a big plot point. What I think is gonna happen is it's gonna create different timelines in the same universe that's going to destabilize everything. And in the end, it's all gonna have to come to a head. Why does that matter? Because I imagine it could be one of these things like what they did with Age of Apocalypse back in the 90s in Marvel Comics, when that alternate reality was collapsing and people escaped into the main Marvel universe. Like Dark Beast, an evil version of Hank McCoy, which was kind of weird. Holocaust, yes I know, not the best name for Marvel to have chosen for a villain that was literally radioactive and killed people. Why would you choose that name, Marvel? But nonetheless, just different things like that. They escaped that timeline. And so this is one of those things where you've got Alfred Molina's Dr. Octopus, you've got Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, you've got Jamie Foxx's Electro, you've got like the Lizard, maybe, possibly, I'm not really 100% sure. It's entirely possible that like when the movie ends and this timeline collapses, right, it all kind of gets condensed back down into a singular timeline because the day's saved or whatever. Some of those guys make it. Some of those guys actually make it into the universe, and now they're there inside the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? Fighting off against Spider-Man or whatever the case happens to be. I don't know, right? I have no real idea here. None of us know until we either see more trailers or until we actually see the movie. But with that being said, guys, I love this episode of What If. It was absolutely phenomenal, right? It was a beautiful episode. You know, I'm as melancholy as it sounds, I'm kind of glad it ended on a dark note, right? One of the things that really always kind of bothered me with comics, especially with Marvel comics, in terms of losing the real world element, is that things largely seem to end on a happy ending, right? For the most part, right? Like we literally just finished a story where a guy from the multiverse who created the symbiotes was trying to destroy everything, and Eddie Brock, quite literally, Venom, by himself, saves the day. As cool as it is, sometimes I just kind of like to see stuff fail, right? I know it makes me sound terrible. I promise I'm not a terrible person, but I know it makes me sound evil. Like, I'd love to watch people fail. Like, that's not really what I mean here, you know, failure. Like, I'm not shooting for that. I'm just saying it makes things a little more tangible, and it actually gives real gravitas to what we're seeing. And at the end of the day, the Watcher was right. Messing with timelines, screwing up this whole multiversal, universal pattern, stuff like that, will lead to death and destruction. And it was an absolute revelation when it came to Stephen Strange. Sure, he saved the life of Christine, doomed the entire universe in the process, and she ended up dying anyway, right? And so all that was left, and really all that is left, is just him and this little tiny space in this great big huge empty void that was the universe, because given how it ended, I assumed he survived. So with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this to an end, and thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.